Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today is going to be interesting. So I decided before I do reviews on a majority of the books that I've read, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I do remember from these books because it's been a while. A lot of this video is going to be about like little snippets here and there, so it's just stuff that I remember. But today I'm going to be doing, it's not like a tag or anything like that, but it's just an idea that like popped into my head and I'm not really sure if it's gonna go well, but we're gonna do it. So today I'm going to be talking about all the books that I disliked or personally kind of sort of hated for one reason or another over the years and growing up as a kid. No offense to any of the authors or anything like that, I do think that some of the stories do have some good traits here and there, but then there are some times where I personally don't like the fact that this story exists. So we're just gonna talk about some of the books that I personally dislike. Take this all with a grain of salt. If you really love these books, then go ahead, go for it. You do you. You can read whatever you want. This is just my personal opinion. We're gonna start. One of the books that I personally dislike very, very, very much because of the subject matter. Sorry, I'll talk a little bit about why I don't like the book in the beginning, synopsis wise, kind of, sort of, but this is gonna be a video about spoilers. So just so that you're aware, don't completely watch this if you're not wanting to get spoiled. This book I personally dislike because of the subject matter, and I think I've talked about this a few times in a couple of my videos. I love the TV show. I think it's really, really well done, and I don't think it's horrible, and I know a lot of people who have never read the book actually don't like the TV show because they kind of think it shouldn't have been depicted because of the subject matter. But personally, I think the book should have never existed to begin with. So I shouldn't have, one reason why I think I personally dislike this book is because I shouldn't have read it at the age I was and during the time because some stuff had happened. And the book that I'm talking about is the infamous 13 Reasons Why. Here's a little image here, right there for you, by J. Asher. This book is something. For those of you who don't know about this book, it's just basically about a girl who, I don't even know if I can say this on this like video. It's about a girl who commits suicide and basically wants to not get revenge, but it seems kind of like that. And she, if you haven't seen the show, I highly recommend you should watch the show if you're of age. Don't read or watch this story if you are under the age of 17, 18. I was like 13 or 14 when I read this book. It wasn't a good time to read it because I had just lost somebody in my life and I didn't know what the story was about. But when I was growing up, we had, I don't know if students still have this, where we have like these summer reading homework assignments where we had to pick a book and then do an essay about it, and this book just so happened to be on the reading list. Turns out I actually ended up having to switch schools, and in that school they didn't have that book on the reading list, so I had to read a whole new book within like 2 or 3 weeks, and that book became one of my favorite books in the whole entire world, and it was the reason why I fell in love with reading. I might do a video about that later on. But this book really wasn't okay for me to read at this time. I had just lost somebody and I wasn't having a lot of good thoughts at that moment. You're 13, you've just lost somebody who's really, really close to you, and then you read this. Granted, nobody told me what this book was about, and I just kind of went into it thinking, okay, this is a book, it's geared towards middle school students, this is fine. But everybody wanted to read it at the time when it came out. They were like, oh my god, this is gonna be a great book. It was like one of those, like, you know, fandom type emergence books and everybody was talking about it, but I didn't know what the heck it was about. So I just picked it because I was like, oh, it kind of looks okay and I don't really like to read, so I'm gonna do it. But when I read this book, I could not even get past the first few pages. I had to listen to it on audio tape because of the emotions I was feeling. I didn't like reading at the time, and then I'm going through this experience. I'm reading this book about this girl who, spoiler alert, who pretty much is sending these video confessions, like these tapes to her whole entire school, who she thinks the people that were in her school or friends or whatever, who she thinks were the reason why she killed herself. Personally, I don't think that's a story that should ever happen. It was so hard for me to read that book, and it wasn't just because I was going through stuff. It was because, one, I didn't like to read, and two, I was reading this. I didn't like to read, and then when I was reading it, I was like, this is such a horrible story, because in my head, and a lot of people will probably contradict me on this. I know there are a lot of people who probably really love this book, and they'll probably say, oh, like, I really, really, really love Hannah. Hannah, I think she's okay in the show, okay? I don't think they casted her horribly, and I think she's an okay character. I don't hate her, I don't love her, but in the book I hated her because there were so many things that were so wrong about this book when I was reading it. There were times, because like her whole justification is that, oh well, I was an outsider and people did small things to me and I was like kind of abused, but not really, but I had a great family life. And I'm not saying that, like you can't have a great family life to be bullied and want to do that. I mean, I had a decent family life and I wanted to do that every now and then. But a lot of her reasons for doing it just didn't really make sense. And I know people will say, oh, but it was a snowball effect and like it just all got to her eventually. But there are a lot of people who go through a lot worse. Think about doing that and don't do it. So I mean, yes, people are different, but I didn't like a lot of the reasoning behind it. And I also thought it was really, really messed up to write a character who pretty much did this act because they wanted vengeance on other people, to make other people feel bad, and not because they wanted to do it and because they thought it would make them feel better. They just did it because they wanted to do it to aggravate other people. And personally, a lot of people that I know who have had suicidal thoughts, they don't do it because of other people. They do it because they're in pain, because they want to do it. Whereas when I read this book, I just saw her as, oh, I'm doing this because I want to make other people feel something and I want them to regret it. Whereas a lot of people that I know, they wouldn't do that. A lot of times they don't even think about the people that are doing these things to them. They kind of just think, well, everything is horrible in my life and I don't want to exist. But I didn't really get that from the book. In the show I did, and there were actually some things that they did change in the show, and I know some people probably know this. The whole rape scene, the whole, like Hannah being in the hot tub, that whole thing, that never happened in the book. She was very, very young in the book. She wasn't 16, she wasn't anything like that. She was really, really young. I think she was like a sophomore, and the show portrays her sophomore going into a junior. And I think that's the reason why I feel more for this show than I do the book, because I don't feel like there's a lot of justification for what happened. And a lot of people could probably tell me like, oh yeah, like no, you're completely wrong, like you can't make people feel what they want to feel. This is also a book character. And like I said, I've had suicidal thoughts too before, Like I've overcome that. I've been going to therapy. I'm trying to get better. And I know people who have gone through worse things, who have thought horrible things in their life. And you know, to me, experiencing it firsthand and seeing other people experience it firsthand, and then you read this book, it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't think it's a horrible book. I mean, like, the show is amazing and it came out of that, but I don't know if it's the best depiction of, you know, suicide. I kind of almost feel like it kind of almost pokes a little bit fun at suicide, like, oh, like anybody can just do it, and you know, I don't know, like there's this weird thing that I feel like it kind of pokes a little bit fun at it. I don't think that like it's intentionally doing that, and maybe that's just my interpretation, but I don't like the idea of like a girl just doing this because, oh, so and so spread a rumor about them. They were on this weird list about how like they were super attractive and this and this and this. The worst that happened in the story, from what I remember, the worst thing that happened to the Hannah was that she got her like butt touched from a random guy in a convenience store. That was about it. That was all that was about, like, the worst thing that happened to her in the show. I mean, in the book, from what I remember. I personally think that that's a horrible thing to happen, but it happens to a lot of girls, and you'd be surprised. I know a lot of relatives who have told me, like, things like that have happened to them. And it's not okay. I don't think that that's okay in any sense of the matter of what's happening, but at the same time, I kind of just feel as though a lot of what happened in the book wasn't really justified. And then what really made me hate it so much more was that I really liked Clay. I still like him in the show, and in the book, the fact that like she kind of like because also her voice doesn't sound like she is depressed. Her voice, like in the book, I don't know why, I never heard her sounding like she was depressed. It just sounded like she was like poking fun and this and this and this. Like when the first time you hear her voice on the videotape in the book, she just sounds like she's like a radio TV show host. Like, hey, we're gonna have fun kind of like voice. I don't know, like maybe that's just the way I interpreted. But yeah, that like, and then I loved Clay, and then she just seems like she's making a joke out of it, like, hey, I'm gonna send this to a bunch of people so that they can all know that they were the reason why I died. Like, I don't know. And then Clay was such a nice kid in the book, and you're reading it through his perspective. You're not reading it through Hannah's perspective the whole entire time. You're mostly reading it through his perspective, and you just see him listening to these tapes. And this book is actually supposed to be taking place like way before like the modern age type of era, and he's just like listening to these tapes and wondering this whole entire time between these 13 tapes, why am I on here, why am I on here? Like, he had so much more anxiety in the book than he does in the TV show. He just kept wondering, why am I on here? Like, I didn't know her. And you're like feeling all of this anxiety, and honestly, by the end of the book, I thought he was gonna commit suicide afterwards, because he kind of just seemed like, well, I'm on here, I didn't really do anything to her other than I didn't like really become friends with her, and now that's my fault because I didn't become friends with her, because I didn't have the guts to talk to her. I mean, it also does talk about like, oh, like that's you could say like, oh, well, like if you see somebody who's depressed, you should go talk to them, or like if you see somebody who's alone, you should go talk to them because maybe they're going through some stuff. I mean, I understand that part, but the whole entire time I just kind of kept feeling bad for him because he now feels horrible for being the reason why she did this. And it was just because he wasn't like all that much of a friend to her. He was more of an acquaintance, and it was just because of the way circumstances happened. And then by the end of it, it kind of just like, I'm pretty sure he goes and hands it off to other people, because what ends up happening, he doesn't tell anybody about it. He just goes and gives it to the next person on the list, which I believe is the principal. And in the show, it turns out that they actually like reported to the police or whatever, but in the book, he just hands it off. He just hands it off to the next person, and it kind of makes you feel like, well, now I kind of don't have any remorse for you. You like literally, because I think I remember in the book it's saying where like he felt like he wanted other people to feel what he felt during that time, and like to me that just kind of makes me think, are you going to do one next? Like, are you going to commit suicide because you went through this experience? And you know, like, because to me that kind of just, I don't know, like that's just my personal opinion on that book. That's why I don't personally like it. I love the TV show, no hate to the author, to any of these authors. I think there are some redeeming factors in the book. It's just, I think I read it at the wrong time, and I don't think anybody should read it unless they're like 17 or 18 or a little bit more mature. And definitely don't read this if you're going through stuff, because you might actually feel like this is 10 times worse to read, because then you're gonna be thinking, well, this person doesn't deserve to die, and then you're gonna feel like, well, like then I deserve to, like, just don't read it if you're that young, okay? The next book I want to talk is about two different books. They're not a series, but they're both written by the same person. Annetta Curtis Klaus. I think she's only ever written 3 books if I remember. I read this book because I read another book by her that I actually really liked, but I didn't like the ending, and it just made me really hate the book overall, and we'll get to that one. But there was a book that she wrote afterwards called The Silver Kiss, and it is about vampires. I don't really like reading about vampires and werewolves and all that kind of stuff because of these books. That's the reason why, and that's probably the reason why I don't really personally am going to enjoy reading Twilight. Anyway, so The Silver Kiss was, I don't know if I should say this. The reason why I didn't like it was because I feel like it was such a weird tease of a book. Like, it was hinting at so much that nothing ever happened. I don't even remember what the characters' names were about. It was supposed to be about a love story between a vampire guy, duh, and a girl who is more plain Jane than Bella herself. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, like this is anything against the author. I actually did like the other book to an extent. But I don't remember anything about this book. All I remember was that it was supposed to be about a love relationship between these two characters, and I'll put their names somewhere up here, and how they couldn't be together, and it was pretty much basically like Twilight, and he ended up like breaking into her parents' house while her parents weren't there, and then there was like a scene where they were at a park and they were just relaxing, being kids, whatever. And then like the whole entire time it's like, imagine like all of the YouTube videos about Twilight where like they're poking fun at it, like I want to be with you, Bella, and I don't want to be with you, and this and this and this. It's all of those videos into a book, into one book, and it's this book. And by the end of it, spoilers, and if you don't want to read this book, I don't recommend you read it, because there's no progression in this story. By the end of it, he's just gone. He just leaves to her own, like he just makes her like be on her own, and this and this and this, and yeah, he just leaves. He comes into her life, makes her feel like we're gonna be in a relationship, but I can't be with you because I'm a vampire, and then he just leaves. He just leaves. Nothing ever gets resolved. Nothing happens in this book. Nothing. Other than they kind of kiss, and then they kind of just stare at each other, and then he's gone, and then she's just there, and she's just like, okay. And then there's no sequel. There's nothing for this book. So that's why I personally don't like this book, and why I'm not gonna talk too much about it, because I don't really remember what it was about, because there was nothing there. The other book that she wrote, which actually is better, but the ending wasn't the greatest. And they made a movie off of this, and the movie actually did the ending a lot better than the book did. And I remember rereading the book and thinking, oh my god, I love this, I love this, I love this, I love this. And by the time I read the book, at the end of the book, I was like, oh, now I remember why I don't like this book. And I actually did an art project on this book, and if you haven't seen one of my videos already, I should be uploading it before this one. One of the artworks that I posted in that video, I did a reimagining of the cover art for this book that she wrote, and I actually think that the whole entire book is really good except for the ending. It's horrible. And it's funny because this book came out before she made The Silver Kiss, and the ending is just, no, like, read this book but don't read the ending. So the book is called Blood and Chocolate, and it's about werewolves. And so basically, I'm gonna pull up their names because I can't remember their names. Vivian, which is, and don't get me wrong, I've read werewolf books before. There's a really great series that I love. It is called Nightshade. Great series. The sequels, oh no, the prequel sequels to those books, we're gonna talk about those in a little bit too. Okay, so this book, Blood and Chocolate, okay, it's a great story, don't get me wrong. It's about a girl named Vivian. She's a werewolf. She's with a werewolf pack, and pretty much it's kind of almost like your typical werewolf story, like fall in love with a human, I'm in a pack. Like, it was great. It was great the whole entire time, except for there was this one character, which is the love interest. And I personally, when I read this book when I was like 14, I did not like the love interest that Vivian had. His name was Aiden, and he was basically depicted as this cool surfer dude who like owns a minivan and like smokes pot and weed all the time, and like just smokes a lot, like, and Hawaiian shirts and shorts and like flip-flops. She fell in love with this guy, and my depiction of him is like that to this day. I don't remember if that's accurate or not, but yeah, he was an interesting character. He had no personal great traits. He had no good traits. Like, he was just like this laid back guy who was just here to be a love interest, which I personally thought it could have been better done, but it wasn't horrible, okay? And the book overall was really great, except for the ending, and this is why I personally don't like this book completely. So she pretty much falls in love with him. She knows she's not supposed to fall in love with him, but she wants to, you know, be her own woman. And the problem is that I believe in her pack, she's like the rightful heir or something like that, and she has to marry somebody that's in the pack, and it's this guy who's like this big macho guy or whatever, and she has to marry him or she can fight him or something like that. And I believe she tries to fight him, and after a while, like, I think she becomes of age and she has to marry him, but she doesn't want to, and she wants to go after Aiden. And so Aiden is pretty much just like this reason for her trying to progress within the story. Remember me saying progress in this story, and she becomes this great female role in this story. She seems so empowering. She's already a werewolf. She's already really like a great character or whatever, and she's trying to go against the pack and trying to change their ways and whatever, okay? And so I forget what happened, but there is a scene by the end of it, because like at this point, little 14-year-old Savannah is over here thinking, oh my god, she's gonna change the pack, and she's gonna be queen, and she's gonna be the female empowerment of She-Wolf. She is gonna be great by the end of this. They're gonna be together. She's not gonna marry the jerk who just wants her because he thinks she's hot and whatever. And like little me is thinking, oh my god, like I love this. I'm gonna love werewolves after this. No. What happens For those of you who have read this book, I'm sorry if you like it. I do like it, but just not the ending. What happens just shatters my dreams as a kid. I'm like, you know, thinking that, oh my god, she's gonna be great. She's like, it's gonna be a great happy ending. They're gonna end up together, this and this and this. No. What happens is that, and this is the reason why I think I didn't ever like Aiden, because he was so laid back and chill and didn't care, and he was just like, yeah, like, you're kind of cute, like, you do whatever you want, man, kind of personality. I'm just thinking of like a guy who's like from California or something at this point, in the 90s. So he pretty much, what happens is, I believe they go on a date or something like that, and I can't remember what happens, but he sees her transform into a wolf. He doesn't know that she's a werewolf, and he sees this, and then he runs away. Which, I mean, is, you know, I think anybody in that situation would run away. Like, hey, you were a human, now you're a werewolf. I'm going to go. He runs away, and then he never comes back. So, yeah, and my childhood was just like, men are not trustworthy in books. And this was at the point where I was like, I'm getting into reading, and then this was the book that just made me not like werewolves after a while. And so I'm like, he left, and like the whole entire time I just kept thinking, he's gonna come back, he's gonna come back, he's gonna come back and redeem himself. This laid back, cool, chill guy and whatever, and I'm like, he's gonna come back, he's gonna come back. Like, you know, like if you've ever lost a parent, like, okay, so my dad was never involved in my life. That was, this is me as a kid who doesn't have a father there in your life, and you're just like, they're gonna come back, they're gonna come back. Like, yeah, they're gonna come back. And that was me throughout the whole entire ending of the book, and I'm like, he's gonna come back, he's gonna come back, and he's gonna, like, you know, help fight or whatever, and this and this and this. And no, he never comes back in the story because he was too scared to come back, which I mean is understandable, but he never comes back. So Vivian, instead of just moving on from this dropout guy who is just so laid back, instead of moving on from him like every other person would, you know what she does? She admits defeat to her own pack and basically becomes a lapdog for the jerk of a guy who she was supposed to marry in the beginning. And the moment I read that, and how she just basically, like, yeah, she just becomes submissive, becomes a lapdog, and just marries the guy she was supposed to marry in the beginning, and you know he's a jerk, and she doesn't rise up, she doesn't do anything, she just ends up in the same place she was in the beginning of the book. Now remember, I said it was so great to see her progression as a character and become this empowering person, all because of this one little thing, and then it's gone, and she just ends up back where she started to begin with, because she was already miserable in the beginning, and she went through this journey just to go back to where she was miserable. And so if you could tell by my face, I'm not happy by this. Yeah, so that's the reason why I dislike that book. I don't know why it's like that, and I don't know what the message was, because there wasn't a good message, because it just disappeared. It was like poof. And some books do this. Some books do it very, very well. Like, spoilers for anybody who has ever read The Hunger Games or watched it, or you've never watched it, Prim is supposed to go into the Hunger Games, and then Katniss ends up taking her place, but by the end of it, Prim dies anyway. So if it weren't for Prim getting voted, none of that would have happened, but history or fate or whatever was meant to have her die in that series. And that's a really great way of doing something like that. But like, this book tried to do something like that, but it it just didn't do it very well, and I just wanted her to be an empowering she-wolf by the end of this and, you know, rule her pack. But no, she ends up with the guy that was a jerk to her, that just saw her as an object. So yeah, don't read this book if you're like 14 or if you just don't believe in that kind of thing. Everything else about that book is great except for the ending, and the movie actually did the ending 10 times better because the movie actually had the two characters. They actually had Aiden be a nice guy. Like, he was so much nicer. I believe he owned like a chocolate, she owned like a chocolate factory. No, not chocolate. She owned a chocolate sweet shop. That's part of the reason why like the whole blood and chocolate thing was a part of it. And he was just like a tourist coming to her hometown, and they basically end up running off together, which I'm completely fine with that ending. That is a decent ending compared to the book. So you can see why I'm angry about that. This video is also going to be about books that, not that I don't hate them, but that either are forgettable or kind of like honorable mentions that I don't personally hate, but I also don't personally like completely. But those three books were really books that I just personally did not like at all. Some other books that were kind of forgettable was If I Stay. I watched the movie and I read the book afterwards, and honestly, they were kind of really boring. I know it touches on a really touchy subject about losing your family in a car accident and then how she's in a coma, which, I mean, I kind of have a similar experience with that, and I know people who have gone through similar experiences like that. But it was just, I don't know, I feel like the want and the reason could have been amped up a little bit more. And it was just kind of like, I don't know, like, it was just there. And I mean, honestly, I don't think that there was a reason for her to stay. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think that that's like a horrible thing to say, but like, it was, the reason why she came back was because her boyfriend wrote her a song and she just missed him. And I don't know, it was just, I don't personally like it, don't personally love it, don't personally completely hate it. I did mention a book series, Nightshade, which is a great series, and part of the reason why I've really liked werewolves, and it's by Adriana Kramer, but she did make 2 spin-off books based off of the main story, and they're prequel sequels. One's called Rift and the other is called Rise, and that's the order that they're in. And the story is so great, but again, it's kind of like blood and chocolate. The ending was not horrible. It didn't like backtrack or anything like that. It was just that it never continued. When I read it, I thought, oh, there has to be a 3rd book or something like that, but it never happened. And I was just kind of left wondering what would happen. I don't remember if there are werewolves in that book, and I don't feel like there are. It's about these 3 characters, and I believe one of the characters named Barrow, and he is like a knight, and it's taken place way back around like the 1800s or something like that, before the actual startings of Nightshade. And they're kind of basically trying to like gather a resistance to fight. If I can pull it up here, sorry. Okay, so Amber is the other girl, and she and Barrow are the cutest couple. I love them. I love the story, don't get me wrong. And they're just trying to gather enough people to fight a resistance. And it's such a great story, but it leaves on such a weird cliffhanger. And I don't understand why. It kind of is just left there like, okay, we're gonna go off to war, but we don't really know what happens to them. And I kind of understand like, oh, well, like, it's a prequel to what happens in Nightshade, but it takes place so far back that I want to know what happens afterwards. And I really thought it was a great story because it's about this girl who wants to be a part of this order, but then she kind of finds out that that group isn't actually a great group. But I believe that she tries to be the best because she doesn't have really great chances of being a part of it. It's been a long time since I've read this book. It's a great series, and it's a great book. I just don't think that the ending was the best. Another book which I just looked at, and these are two other books that I actually really don't like at all, and they just have that way of like not having any progression in the stories. Like, this book is called The Secret Letter, and I picked it because the cover looked cool. Don't do that, kids. The Secret Letter was basically a detective novel. I love myself a good mystery. I love any kind of TV show that involves investigation shows. But here's the thing. If you watch a lot of investigation shows, a lot of times you could go through 3 or 4 seasons of that show and not remember a single episode, a single character, unless it's like the main cast, like say Criminal Minds or Law and Order Special Victims Unit. I remember all the main characters, but I don't remember a single episode of what happened. But the same thing happened with this book, Scarlet Letter. Pretty much, so it's pretty much like an investigation. Apparently, I've just read the synopsis and I remember what happened. So it's this girl named Dora, and she wants to, this is around the time of Sherlock Holmes, and pretty much the story just wasn't really memorable. She believes that Sherlock is her father, and she wants to be an investigator, and she ends up stumbling upon another investigator who is around her age, a little bit younger, and then they end up like solving an investigation together. I don't know, maybe it was just like, I don't really remember the story, but I remember not really liking it. And I thought it would have been a lot better considering it's a Sherlock, story. But I feel like a lot of like murder mystery or investigation type books, I just don't remember what happens in them afterwards. Like, I could read so many and watch so many shows like that, but I won't remember a single thing that happened in the story. I don't know if anybody else feels that. I have a friend who's even told me that he feels pretty much the same way. Another couple of books that are interesting mentions, and I want to talk about a couple of these. Okay, so I love this author. She's great. She follows me on Twitter. Loved her. She even replied to a couple of my tweets, and I don't think that this story is really bad. I don't think it's for me, and I feel like any kind of school that I feel like that any kind of book that involves a magical school or going to school, I just don't personally love. And I think it's just because I personally don't like school. So for me to read about a character going to school, I don't like that, because I'm like, I'm reading so that I don't have to think about school, and you're putting me in school. So we're not gonna do that. Etiquette and Espionage, I believe I've read all 3 of the books in that series. I don't remember a single thing that happened in that book, and it's not that it's a bad series, because I do remember it being really cool. I believe it is about espionage. It's about these girls who are in Victorian era, which is very cool, being agents and espionage. It's kind of like Assassin's Creed, but with girls. Lots of girls. And I can't remember if there are guys that are fighting. I believe their school is also like floating in the air, and I think it was a really great book. It was just really unmemorable, and I don't remember a whole lot of what happened in the series. But like I said, a lot of books that involve schools in them, I don't really enjoy them all the time. It's just an honorable mention, but it's not a horrible book, and I do recommend you guys reading it. I will say though, some books you should not read when you're a certain age, and some books you should read when you're a certain age. And here are a couple of books that are honorable mentions. I don't personally hate them, but I also don't personally really like them. James Dashner. Now, before you like click off, I'm not gonna say The Maze Runner, because that's a great series, and I kind of have been monitoring his Instagram, and I saw that he might actually be doing another story. I'm not sure, and he hasn't given any like hints, but he posted a picture, and I'm gonna post it here. It's of Newt, and if you don't know, Newt is my favorite character in that whole entire series. And if you've read that series, the movie did it so bad. Spoilers, if you're gonna kill Newt, you better kill him the right way, okay? You're not gonna shoot him with the gun and then make him turn into a fucking crank. You're not gonna do that. You don't do that. And they made it, but I love the actor. Oh my god, he's one of my favorite. But and then James does this, and he posts this on his Instagram hinting at something, and I just, if he does another story all about Newt, I'm going to lose my mind. I haven't read Fever Code yet, and I really want more Newt. Newt is my favorite. Anyway, so aside from that, he did come out with another series, I believe after the fact, called The Eye of Minds, and then The Rule of Thoughts. I read this when I was fairly young. I want to say I was like 15, 16, and I think honestly this was just meant for like a really young audience. I don't remember much of what happens, and I believe they're like in a Matrix type world, if I can pull up what it's about. I believe it even says that it's meant for younger people, and I was around like 15, 14 when I read this book, and I just didn't really like it. It was just kind of out there. Yeah, it's about gamers, basically, is what it's about. Kind of like if you've ever read Ready Player One, kind of like that, but more for the young kids, if that makes sense. Yeah, so it's basically kind of almost like Ready Player One. It's pretty much about a gamer who, I believe, he gets immersed into this game system, and then he ends up being recruited for a special mission type stuff. It seems so cool when you read these synopsises, and then sometimes you read it and you're just like, this was not what I asked for. And this was just like, it's a really young version of almost like Ready Player One, kind of, in a sense. I didn't really personally like it, and it wasn't memorable. And that's another two books that are on my list of things that I didn't personally love. And let's see, some more books I didn't personally like. I guess another honorable mention would be Legend by Marie Lu. I think it's a decent book. It's not horrible. It's not like the worst thing in the world. I think it's just like I don't like the character of June. I did actually do an art book. I did drawings of the two characters on a video a couple years ago, I think, and if you want to go watch that, feel free. And I believe I also did a review on the first book. I never finished the series, and I do want to finish it. I don't think it's a horrible book series. It's just not my favorite. And I think it really has to do with June. I don't personally like her character all that much. She's really cold shoulder, heart, like very hardened type of person. And I understand why, because she's supposed to be a military type. But I think as a main character, I don't know if I really like that in a character. And then another book that I just did a review on is Don't Turn Around. This is a part of a series, and for the first time, I'm not gonna finish the series. Normally, I do finish series, even if I didn't like the first book. I did that with, I believe I did that with Blood and Chocolate, and I also did that with a couple of other books that I've read, and I can't remember which ones. But Don't Turn Around wasn't like my favorite thing in the world. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't like, it didn't give me a reason to want to read more of it. And I think it was just the same thing. It was with one of the main characters, Noah. She's not special, but then she is special, and I kind of like, just go watch my review about that one. I don't really personally like her. And I don't even like Peter either, and he's another main character. I don't like either of the main characters in that book. But I don't know how it ends, so I'm not a great judge on that one. Another book that I was actually forced to read for a book club was called Shadow Shaper. My friend actually gave me a copy of this book. I think it was just this book called Shadow Shaper, like the concept was really cool. She's an artist, and I think there's like a video game that's out there or some kind of movie or something like that where like you can draw and then it comes to life. I know some other books have done that. One book that I was recently reading was called Renegades, and one of the characters could do that as like a superpower, and I think the idea is kind of cool, but it was just so, I don't know, like the book is also about like culture and heritage and like different ethnicities, and I think that's really cool, but I feel like it was so much about that I didn't really see the magical aspect to the story, and it just wasn't really memorable, and I didn't really personally love it. Another book which I personally did not completely love, and it's actually not really like a young adult book. I don't know what kind of book it would be categorized under, but it's called Frankenstein in Baghdad. I had to read this for a class, and it is a novel. It's supposed to be a play kind of off of Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein, which I've also read. That one, let's put it in these terms, classic books are meant to be classic books, whether you hate them or you like them. I'm kind of indifferent towards a lot of them. They're not horrible and they're not bad. They're classic books, and I appreciate them, I really do, and a couple of them I do actually like, but this kind of like, I don't know, like some of it was okay, but then other parts of it weren't, and I believe it was based off of Frankenstein, and it was also based off of, I think, I can't remember what it was also based off of. It's supposed to be based off of like modern day kind of like war zone. I think it was based off of like Afghanistan type of warfare. I'm sorry if I'm like completely wrong on that, but it was supposed to kind of almost be like that, like more modern day Frankenstein. Some parts of it were okay, but it was always switching like point of view, and I think that's what really like completely confused me on it, and I don't know, I didn't really love this book all that much. I don't really recommend it unless you want to read it. That's the last book on my list. I don't really have a lot of books that I personally hate. I more often than not really enjoy a lot of books personally, but there are some hits and misses every now and then, even from some of your favorite authors. Like I said, James Dashner came out with that series, and I really wasn't a big fan of it. You might be a really big fan of it, but I really wasn't. I mean, I'm sorry if like anybody loves these books and you really like are an advocate about it. Like, don't take my opinion as like horrible, like take it as a grain of salt, and this is not anything against like any of the authors. I think a lot of them are actually really great authors. Like I said, even some of like the books that I personally didn't like 13 Reasons Why, I think it was a good idea to like shed light on depression and suicide, but I don't think it was a great story, but it wasn't horribly horrible. And the same thing with like Blood and Chocolate. I don't think it was a horrible story. I just think that the ending wasn't the greatest. Everybody has their own opinion, and I'm not like saying, oh, these authors are horrible. I don't think any author is horrible. I mean, you guys wrote a book and you got it published. That is like one of my dreams to do. And to be honest, my book is probably gonna suck. So, but these are just some books that I personally really didn't like, especially growing up as a kid. A lot of these books I read when I was really young, and a lot of them just didn't resonate with me very well. I know some people who actually do really like these books, and they thought that they were really good. So to be honest, that's the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything like that, please feel free to leave them down below in the comment section. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see all you guys in the next video. Bye.